a well-regulated militia,
being necessary to the security of a free state,
the right of the people to keep and bear arms,
shall not be infringed.
Howdy, y'all. Welcome back to the Wright Brothers for episode 10. We are now in double digits. Congratulations. It wouldn't be for all of our loyal supporters in the tribe who made it happen. If you're not in the tribe and this is your first video, please feel free to like, share, and subscribe. We're happy to tell you that membership in the tribe is completely free, so feel free to join us. If you do choose to subscribe, also please press the bell down below so you're updated on all future notifications. Without further ado, let's go ahead and get into it. So today what we want to talk about is the Second Amendment. And the Second Amendment is honestly something that has been raging in debate now, especially in this past year or so, specifically because of instances such as that happened in Parkland, Florida recently. What's interesting to note, though, is that when you think about not just Parkland, Florida, but when you also think about Compton, California, and you think about Titusville, Florida, and you think about Santa Fe, Texas, what you'll notice, though, is that one instance of gun violence gained disproportionate media exposure. And what we're going to do today is really jump into why we think that is. So I'm going to throw it to Eddie right now so he can give his take and really jumpstart this conversation on the Second Amendment and why it is important to talk about and important to protect, because make no mistake, it is under fire in current times.
Absolutely, and obviously no pun intended with being under fire, but there's obviously a media narrative that we've all seen tried to be pushed. But what I would really like to point out is the disparity in coverage depending on the way these events all went down. Of course, the most infamous shooting of 2018 was the one down in Parkland, Florida. And we saw all the media that came from that. We saw the advent of David Hogg and his anti-Second Amendment contemporaries. But what we also saw was that singular event, while tragic, and of course all these events are tragic, and we strive not to downplay any loss of life in such a senseless and brutal manner as this, but that's something that we've noticed, is that instances like that where the media can sink their teeth into an anti-Second Amendment narrative, those tend to gain far more coverage than shootings that, say, didn't end quite as catastrophically or were ended by an armed citizen exercising their Second Amendment rights. The one that comes to mind most recently close to me was in Sutherland Springs, Texas, which is just a little ways south of San Antonio. Of course, that was the one where the former Air Force member discharged with dishonor. He ended up shooting a church and was headed away from the church with the intent to do more damage. And he was apprehended by an armed citizen and basically stopped in his tracks. We don't even hear that man's name mentioned in the media anymore. That man's name is Stephen Williford. Look him up on Google. He had a limited number of interviews on Fox, maybe one or two on CNN, and that was it. This man put himself in danger to save the lives of those he was friends with, and maybe some people he didn't even know, and he doesn't get the credit that he deserves for it because it doesn't advance that anti-Second Amendment narrative. The other shooting that happened was also at a high school in Santa Fe, Texas. A lot of people don't even know there's a Santa Fe, Texas, but there is. It's near Houston, and the media covered it for maybe I don't even think the media press was a week. And what I'm saying is not that there needs to be a huge media caravan at every single one of these things. Actually, I think the opposite is true. We don't need to be giving these mass shooters the notoriety that they so desperately crave. But at the same time, if you're going to do it for Parkland, I think that you should do it for Santa Fe. But the problem is, in Santa Fe, you have a lot of Texans, a lot of conservatives who are not as keen on a mass shooting happen, so we need to immediately enact legislation to curtail Second Amendment rights. And because of that, I feel like we saw such a suppression of the coverage and outrage that should have been outpoured the same as in Parkland, that it really brought to mind the sharp contrast between the media narratives. So, Damani, I know you've noticed the same thing. What's your take on the difference and how the Second Amendment remains under attack?
Well, I think it's interesting that when you do talk about instances like what you mentioned in Sutherland Springs, and then juxtapose that against those instances that happened in Parkland, what you see though is that the minute there is any opportunity for particularly the left to come out in force and strongly push for gun control, is in the wake of one of these mass shootings, and that in itself, I feel it's terrible for someone to come out of the woodworks at a certain time, only when their narrative stands to be furthered, and then choose to bloviate about why they think that all guns should be confiscated or that there should be common sense gun control. Make no mistake, there should be measures enacted to make sure that the wrong people do not get guns in their hands, because they have a history of going out and exacting malevolence against normal citizens. But when you think about the Second Amendment and what it was intended to do, it was intended to arm the people and allow them to be their own primary means of defense. And make no mistake, there's always going to be people who choose to be vacuous and just go on and on and on about why you don't need to have a gun with you. And just to be fair, when you think about instances where your life could be in danger, you think about someone who possibly breaks into your house or whatever, or even instances like these school shootings or church shootings where someone breaks into an area, and basically you need to have a way to protect yourself. And that's not to say that everyone needs to be armed, but the right people do need to be armed in order to take out these people and not be sitting ducks waiting to call the authorities and have them come out to basically met out whatever needs to be done to the perpetrator. So I just think that it's disingenuous for people to come out of the woodworks and just say we need gun control whenever there's mass shooting, especially when you have instances to the contrary of their argument. When you do have people like the man in Titusville, Florida, or the security guard in Compton, who was able to actually stop someone who had malicious intent from exacting whatever they wanted to exact upon the unsuspecting populace. So with that being said, Eddie, I kind of wanted to get your take again on basically more in depth around why you think gun control has become such a hot topic, and in ways that we can actually present it in a different light, in a light that makes sense, in a light that actually is going to help regular, well-meaning citizens arm themselves and protect themselves against those who would do us harm.
Yeah, well, what bothers me is the fact that, you know, we always hear about what doesn't work when it comes to the Second Amendment, but and then we hear all these examples cited of, you know, other countries or far off lands that have this gun regulation and that gun regulation and how it works out for them. I always am very careful about those comparisons, because the United States is unlike any other country on the face of this earth. We do not follow anybody; everyone else follows us. And that's not spoken out of hubris. That's a reflection of the type of demographics that we have here in this country, and the way that we are allowed to interact with each other. That's really without peer around the globe. But it really takes a true mumpsimus to look at places like Chicago or look at places like Baltimore. And I know for some reason we're not supposed to mention those bastions of criminal activity. But when it comes to such an important topic as the Second Amendment, they are relevant and they do deserve to be talked about. Those two cities in question have some of the strictest gun regulations in the entire country, the strictest. And we're talking about a country that already has over 200,000 gun laws on the books already. So we're not at a loss for gun legislation. But when we see the results of what's happening in places like Chicago and in places like Baltimore, members of the media in those cities are afraid to leave their abodes for fear of being assaulted. You have people who in Chicago, where if it's a mother that is fearing for her life against a low life deadbeat dad or baby daddy of hers, she has to go through so much red tape in order to get her hands on a means of self-defense that by the time she does, the damage often already is done. We actually had an instance that happened this past week where a mother was unable to defend herself, got shot in the back by a man with criminal intent who happened to be her boyfriend or ex-boyfriend, something of that nature. But the point is, she was left without any sort of reasonable means to defend herself, specifically because of strict gun regulation. And a lot of times we hear from people who push for it that they're trying to protect the innocent. in the wake of these tragic school shootings. It's a great intent, but a horrible way to go about it is by curtailing our Second Amendment freedoms. And I could go on and on and on, but I'll leave y'all with this. There's actually an interesting historical fact. Back when the Confederate States of America was a thing, thank God they took an L, but they actually copied the Second Amendment wording that the Union did, with one tiny change. In the United States Second Amendment, there's a comma after the word militia. There wasn't one in the Confederate version. What that does from a legal standpoint is it makes the argument that the militia is the only reason to have a Second Amendment. Obviously, militias are not a thing in present-day United States, but because of that one comma, we can use that as a demonstration of the fact that the Founding Fathers saw fit for regular, normal, everyday citizens, lay people, not just soldiers, to have the right to keep and bear arms how we see fit. So thank God for the Founding Fathers' prescience in that, and it's up to us now to be able to defend it. So, Damani, take us home with how you think we should regard the Second Amendment going forward and keep it in its present form.
Right. Well, we should hold the Second Amendment in the highest possible esteem. Any politician can choose to trot out after tragedies that we see that are related to gun violence and choose to be a blatherskite on the issue, but it's not going to change the fact that the overwhelming majority of gun owners don't harbor any malicious intent whatsoever. And it's important to make sure those people do have the means to protect themselves against those who would do us harm. And I think for us, we need to really cleave to the Second Amendment and realize what it was intended to do, because people are already coming for the First Amendment. We see it happen every day. Mm-hmm. You know, when they come for the First Amendment, after that, guess what's right next? The Second Amendment, and we're going to make sure that doesn't happen. So we appreciate y'all taking this time to join us once again. As we said before in the beginning, if you like this video, please give us a like, please share, and please subscribe. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for our extremely loyal and incredible fan base called the Tribe. We appreciate each and every one of you and what y'all do and how y'all have really helped us move this movement forward. This is a movement. It's just us two guys speaking extemporaneously on the issues of the day, but we wouldn't do it if we didn't have an audience per se, like we have now, and y'all's appreciation is what really keeps us going. So we appreciate y'all. Shout out to all of our subscribers, all of our supporters, our family, friends. We love all of y'all. Stay tuned. Episode 11 is going to be a little bit different. We're excited for it. It's been coming for a while now. Now that we're in double digits, we're going to change it up for y'all a little bit and give you something a little bit different as well. Just so we can make sure that we even throw some levity in at times as well. So we appreciate you taking this time once again. And without further ado, thanks and gig 'em.
Thanks and gig 'em.
The first revolution is when you change your mind about how you look at things and see that there might be another way to look at it that you have not been shown. The revolution will not be televised, and be no rerun, brothers and sisters. The revolution will be live.